and no one seems to agree on anything, let
Yeah.
alone politics, anything going on with
Yeah.
COVID.
Yeah.
We
Forget
can't even
about
agree
that.
on
Yeah.
how much protein we should be eating. So
Exactly. And I want to respond to some of the things that you said. I want to go back to the beginning about you. You know, you said that you're not an expert, but you've become an expert in your field. And my take on that is this. I can do what I want.
Whenever you get bored, you can end it.
I don't think I'm going to. Listen, you're a friend of Uzella, right?
Yeah.
We're probably going to hang out here for 2 hours, whether you like it or not. Anyway, welcome to Fishbowl Podcast. One of the things that really piques my interest about you, I mean, everything does in the bio that I read, is especially because I'm at the age that I'm at right now, is you're a very versed in super longevity.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm all about that. 66 years of age. I had some strokes 10 years ago that paralyzed me, overcame it. And I'm all about health, fitness, and longevity. I do all that. I'm a personal life coach, actually, for many people. And I specialize in, I go after the immune system first. I fixed that. And that was one of the things that during this pandemic, I never closed my business. I have a gym business, a personal training studio. While everybody was closing around me, I stayed open because I focused on the immune system, that it's bulletproof. Basically, if you do the right thing, it's better than any drug that you're going to take. That was my stance. It still is. So I'm really into what what you're all about. I'd like to know your sort of how you operate with when you're talking to somebody like me. If I want to increase my longevity, super longevity, how does that work when I come see Kat?
Well, I don't think I know more than other, people out there that are considered experts, but I've been following and learning everything I could for the last 40 years from people that I consider experts in health and longevity, and everything from the bodybuilding area. In fact, I know very close friend is Jeannie, who had it was a syndicated television show. Did you ever see the show called Body Buddies?
I did not.
Body Buddies was on for 20 years after the Jack LaLanne show. And it was Jeannie and her husband, Ernie.
Okay.
And they were a couple and did, she was back in the 80s. She would be in the leotard and doing the exercises, and he'd be showing the men's exercises.
Yeah.
So I always been interested in that area. So what happened with me is I grew up in New York, and I was born in the 50s. I'll be 65 next month. And so I'm in New York, and I moved out to California over 30 years ago. And when I got here in the early 80s, I went to the gym for the first time.
Wow.
And because it was kind of funny, I told everyone, yeah, I'm going out to California. I had never been here.
Yeah.
And I got here at the end of January in the early 80s, and I came out of a snowstorm. And the day I got here, it was one of those Southern California days when if it's sunny, it could be in the 75.
Right.
And I said, where am I? Felt like I was in a resort. And I said, that's it. I'm staying here. So that was many years ago. But when I first got here, I decided I wanted that, the California dream, the California lifestyle.
Right.
So I said, well, and I went to the gym, and that was it. So I was a fitness instructor for a while. I went through UC Irvine to get certified as a personal trainer. Then I was so interested in nutrition and the biomechanics of the body, and I became a chiropractor. But I retired from that, and now I just work one-on-one with people. But as I got older, even in my 40s, and I'm sure notice this, people that are athletes or people that work out or do anything physical, they notice it first.
Yep.
People sitting around, they know they're getting older, but they
Yeah.
don't really feel it and know that something, major is happening.
Yeah.
So even in my 40s, I was very interested in anything to do with anti-aging. So I became certified as an anti-aging practitioner through the A4M. And what I do today is I just work one-on-one with people that want to slow their aging. So if you came and said, I probably don't do much different than you do working with people, because I think between the two of us, we might have over 100 years
Yes.
of knowledge and experience in these areas, right?
Yeah.
So the first thing I like to do is really sit down and talk to someone for an hour. And I ask lots of questions, and I try to get a real idea of who they are, what their childhood was like, what did they eat, their teenage years, their 20s and 30s, and what their goals are now. And I love tests because, as you know, someone could look healthy on the outside, but testing and monitoring is always a good idea. So I ask them if we can get any tests they've had over the years, and your tests are your property, so you can contact any doctors and get those. And then whatever I don't have, like let's say we want to look at your vitamin D level or your omega-3 level, anything you don't have, I can order those, and then we kind of go from there.
Yeah.
And as far as diet and did you ever notice when you were in your 20s and you learned about nutrition as much as you could learn, and we know a lot more now, but
Yeah.
if you were bodybuilding and you were working out, you probably learned a certain way to eat. And at some point you could talk to people, and I think in our 20s we know it all.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Once we learn something, now we're our own little expert on it.
Yeah.
And what I've learned, I think true wisdom is the day that you realize that you know nothing.
There you go. That's right.
Every year we realize how much we don't. But think about, you learn something new every day, right? So if you asked me even 2 years ago, what's the best way to eat? How should I eat? Everybody goes through their keto period or their vegan period, and I've always been kind of middle of the road, and saying, I think, more selection, where they say, eat the rainbow.
Yeah.
But then here we are eating the rainbow, and Dr. Gundry comes along with his book on, the plant paradox.
Right.
Have you ever read that or heard about
No,
Dr.
but
Gundry?
I've heard about him. Yes, but I haven't read it.
In the plant paradox, the paradox is that vegetables are good for us, right? Veggies are good.
Yeah.
However, he makes a good point, and then I started reading other books, so it's not just his idea. Anyone interested in the carnivore diet or people that are more animal based, they will remind you that plants cannot run away like other animals.
True.
So every single, living thing has a way to protect itself. And since plants can't run, they learn to protect themselves with certain chemicals, little plant phytochemicals. Some of them are good for us, but some of them are poison.
Right. They're lethal.
Very lethal to little insects, let's say, that are attacking the plant. The plant will let the insect eat a little bit, but then it will get sick enough that it will stop eating because the plant doesn't want to die. And so they made a good point. A lot of these people that are anti lectins. So what they discovered is lectins are just one protein, but lectins in certain plants are poisonous to us. Now we're too big. We're not an insect, so it might not kill us, but it is not good for us.
Yeah.
And so you can go online, and if you want to find out which foods are highest in lectins. So how about gluten intolerance? Gluten, a lot of people are trying to stay away from gluten, either because they found that they actually have a gluten intolerance. But I don't think, that's like the new thing. I'm not eating gluten. I don't think all those people are gluten intolerant, but they have found that gluten can damage the lining of the intestine, and it could do a lot more really bad things if you look up gluten. But what people may not realize is that gluten is a lectin. It's just one of the lectins. So lectins themselves. And then you've probably heard about like the nightshade family.
No, I'm learning all kinds of stuff here today.
Oh, okay. Well, the nightshade family is, remember, like when we were kids, if we would read fairy tales and they would use deadly nightshade. It was a plant that could kill people, like a belladonna or something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, nightshade is a plant and it is poisonous, but there are many other plants and vegetables in the nightshade family. Things like potatoes, tomatoes, eggplant, I think chia maybe, or is chia full of lectins? But chia, which is supposed to be a fantastic superfood, has a downside. And tomatoes, a lot of people love tomatoes. Come on, tomatoes, they're healthy, right? Well, they have, there's something called solanine, which is a chemical which is in a lot of these nightshade vegetables. Potatoes have it. So that's why it's better to eat a sweet potato than a white potato. And in fact, the sweet potato is more of a prebiotic. It's more of it's a better carb than a white potato. Anyway.
Yeah, people have asked me about that, and I'd like to comment on that if I could, because it's interesting I see food. And goes back to my bodybuilding and the reasons I make certain choices with my diet, because I use the macros and I use food as a way to exist and a way for me to perform. With a white potato, and I agree with what you're saying, but a lot of bodybuilders will use a white potato because it's very high glycemic, and it's a way to get immediate or some pretty fast energy or make you more vascular. We use it as a tool, and I think that's exactly what you've gotten to the point where now you're identifying these things in a way that you can really use it for good and for at least understand when it's not really good for you, because I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to eat white potatoes, but you have to know how to use them. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I do. So, but remember, you sound a little bit like me, like everything in moderation, and you're not going to one extreme or the other. But for example, you do have your extremists, right? Now, if you read Dr. Gundry's book, he will not eat white potatoes because he says white potatoes are part of that nightshade family. And while they're not going to poison you, what they do contribute to a lot of negative things. You'd have to look it up because off the top of my head, I can't remember why they're so bad. But each thing that a lot of times we think is healthy can have a downside. Yeah. And so if you read the carnivore, I think it's called the Carnivore Code by Paul Saladino. He's an MD. He had a lot of health problems his whole life, and he went completely carnivore. And that means he doesn't even eat, there's certain things that you can eat on a keto diet. Remember, keto is not just animal-based. They're just saying, keep your carbs low enough so that you go into ketosis and you're burning ketones. Right. But animal-based people, he eats no vegetables. Right. And what's interesting, when I first heard of it, I thought, that sounds like a terrible diet. Yeah. That cannot be healthy. Then I read his book, and he probably more than anyone I've ever seen cites, because he knew that people were going to say, come on, right? Yeah. But it's such an interesting book because even if you don't go that way, I love to look at all the different reasons why, and he has a lot of them. I mean, he cites so much proof that you really, when you get done, you have to say, wow. But what I'm blown away by, it really is kind of funny that you cannot find one expert out there that really knows their stuff, and you still can't find a consensus.
Right.
Like, how about protein, right? Protein, when I was younger, I thought I had figured it out. My body, my body weight, my exercise level, my lean body mass, and how many grams of protein I should eat, right? And I'm sure you've calculated, because you don't just want anything to be to chance when you're bodybuilding, right? So, but even the last few years, especially, there is who is considered the keto. She's the keto queen. She's probably written more keto books and keto cookbooks. Have you ever heard of Maria Emmerich?
Nope. I'm going to hear about one of your people, but no, I have not.
Maria Emmerich, if you look on Instagram, she's all over it with keto. She's in the keto world. She is really famous. And she's found a way, her cookbooks, she's found a way to make anything that you love, right? Animal-based or keto, and it's really interesting. Even her bread, she makes a bread out of egg whites that she whips. You have to whip it in one of those big mixers for like 15 minutes to get the egg whites. And there's a few other things in there, but there's just a few ingredients, and it's pure keto. And you can actually make what looks like a Wonder Bread. You can make a more dense bread, and it actually tastes good. And so people that want to stay away from wheat, gluten, lectins, grains,
there are options.
That's the way to go.
Yeah.
But you have Maria Emmerich, and she has an entire chart where she has figured out the best amount of protein that the body should have, right? Mm-hmm. So your personal opinion, like if you could think off the top of your head, what would you say for a 200-pound person, let's say, how many grams of protein would probably be good for the average person, and then if they're working out?
For the average person, half a gram per 1 pound of body weight. For the person that's training, and it depends on what kind of training you're doing, anywhere from 1 to 3 grams per 1 pound of body weight.
And that sounds very much like I think, and what would probably be, you'd probably get a consensus in that area. Then you have people in different directions that you might consider extreme, but then when you actually read their proof behind why they're saying certain things, it's crazy. They all seem to have proof that this is the way to go.
Yeah.
Like Dr. Gundry. Now, Gundry, the reason I read his books and I listened to him is because he's in his 70s. He looks fantastic, but he didn't spend his life working out, taking care of his health. He's an MD, and he was the head of cardiothoracic surgery at Loma Linda. So he was a cardiologist, then a surgeon, then he became the head of surgery. And he said that what led him to where he is now is that he would be called when doctors had patients who they were in such bad shape, like they would need a quintuple bypass or something. And the doctor was afraid they'd die on the table. And they would send him the worst cases. And he said, sometimes people came to him and he said, you're in such bad shape. If I put you on the table, even though I'm good and people, send me the worst, you'll probably die on my table.
Yeah.
And they would say, Dr. Gunn, what do I do? And he'd say, well, and he was at such a loss that he would say, well, really maybe try to change your diet and do this or do that. So a few people started coming back to him saying, hey, Dr. Gundry, I did this or that. So he learned a little late in life but he has a clinic in Palm Springs, and people come to him, and you can't even get in to see him.
Yeah.
It's so many people. So I'm reading and I'm following along what he says, and then he gets to protein, and he says that the average person needs about 0.35 grams of protein for every pound.
So that's less than a half. Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
That is like almost nothing, really. Right. He's saying that, if you work out, maybe go up a little bit, but that's all you need.
Yeah.
And he likes to say one and done. If you look at his podcast, or he'll say one and done. He'll eat, maybe protein one time a day.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think so, especially as we get older. I think we actually need more protein. But he cites so much proof behind, and the fact that, remember, when we take in too much protein, it can, it's taxing on our kidneys. So he has all these reasons why people are eating too much protein.
Yeah.
Then you look at someone else's books, an expert who says absolutely 1 gram per pound of for the average person. They're saying, no, that is not too much. So to this day, I'm still trying to, figure it out. And no one seems to agree on anything, let alone politics, anything going on with COVID.
Yeah. Forget about
agree
that.
on how much protein we should be eating. So
exactly. And I want to respond to some of the things that you said. I want to go back to the beginning about you. You said that you're not an expert, but you've become an expert in your field. And my take on that is this: as far as being an expert, a lot of us call ourselves experts. Doctors call themselves experts. And I will say this, and Albert Einstein and my dad both said the same thing in different ways. My dad says it's hard to replace firsthand experience. And Albert Einstein said true knowledge is through experience. So my belief system is, and I've done this even like as a personal trainer, anything that I've done it myself. And I've done it for a long time. I believe in this firsthand experience. I don't believe in, because it goes to your point in that, who in the hell do you believe at some point? Now, I don't know if now I'm gonna give you a person's name. Tell me if you've heard of him. Have you heard of a doctor named Dr. Mauro Di Pasquale?
No.
Gotcha. We're even now. Yeah, he wrote the last thing that he wrote was the ketogenic diet. Maybe you heard of that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's Dr. Mauro Di Pasquale. In the late 80s, Dr. Di Pasquale and myself wrote a book called The Anabolic Diet. Now, okay, this is before keto and all these diets like that were sexy, okay? We wrote what's called the anabolic diet, and all that diet is, it's a high-fat diet, okay? And again, when it gets all popular belief, as you can imagine, especially back then, because everybody thought that the fat was the culprit. It's not. It's absolutely not. We know that. You and I know that for sure. And I can prove it. But no, it was a high-fat diet. 56% of the diet came from fat. And it was basically red meat, bacon, red meat. You've heard of all these. I think the carnivore diet is like that. But it was more about making sure that you ate the saturated fat, because your body was now operating in it has two energy systems, which I've had quite a few doctors on and people on, and I kind of test them a little bit. And I'm surprised that a lot of them don't realize how that you have two different metabolisms, and there's a way to access both of them and utilize them as a tool. I haven't heard anybody talk to me into any degree that lets me wonder that I wonder if you're really an expert in this, doc. And I'm not bagging on them. I'm just making a point, because when so I wrote this book, I trained on this diet. I know everything about how these diets work. And I can tell you this from my experiences with people, and this is coming through Dr. Di Pasquale, but I did everything that we talked about in the book. If you want to lower somebody's cholesterol, you have them eat a high-fat diet and lower their carbohydrates, because carbohydrates is where the problem lies. Why? because your body can't store that many carbohydrates. What happened back in the day? Said, well, fat is the culprit. The RDA said we got to cut all the fat out of the diet, low fat diet.
That was sad.
Yeah. So what did everybody do? They started eating more carbohydrates, and guess what? The overall health of the population got worse. Why is that? Well, it's because the carbohydrates, you get so much in your system, and your body, it goes into the fight or flight mode because you got all this sugar. Your body doesn't want you to have high sugar, so it transports that extra sugar and it stores it as a triglyceride. Therein lies the problem. And the triglyceride itself is not the problem. It's just that when it gets over 500 per whatever the measurement that they use, then it becomes a problem. Not fat. It's actually the sugar, the carbohydrate. When I had my strokes, I had 3 strokes 10 years ago that paralyzed me. And I decided, because I was in the bodybuilding industry I still am, but I was a bodybuilder and I knew cardio, I knew diet, I knew everything to the nth degree because that's all I do every day, like what you do. And I chose not to go to physical therapy because they wanted me to become functional and I wanted to be 100%. So that guy just went by the wayside after the first visit. I go to the doctor. So after 4 months of doing my own rehab, I went to a cardiologist because I had a hernia. And the doctor asked me all these, how did you get this well? And so I'm thinking, this is really interesting. My cardiologist is asking me how in the hell I did it. Beep, beep, a lot goes on, And so what I did is I used to in order for me to be able to get my hernia, they wanted to make sure I didn't have any small holes in my heart, because if you go under anesthesia, especially if you've had strokes, you could have another one on the table. So they wanted to rule that out. When I had all those tests done, the doctor says, well, you're 35% overall blocked in all your arteries. And I thought, oh my God, that's horrible. And he said, no, we don't start treating people until they're 70% blocked. And I thought, yeah, that's what I did. Wow. Well, I'm competitive that way. For the next year, all I did was I changed my diet around. And all I did basically was lower my carbohydrate intake. That's all I did. And I went back and the doctor took all these tests again on me again because I wanted to see where, what the blockage was. He goes, I can't believe it. You've reduced it another 20%. How the hell did you do that? You know what I mean? So when it comes to somebody being an expert, I think this is what I'm getting back to in my point. I take that with a grain of salt, because I'm sorry, if you don't have firsthand experience, and a lot of it, like I have 40 years now of experience, you're talking shit to me. And I'm not going to believe you. If you have a study here or a study there, that's fine. Right. That's part of the measurement. But I want to know, tell me what you did and how you did it, and walk me through that process and how, because we know that just because you put everybody on the exercise program that Arnold Schwarzenegger used, not everybody's going to turn out looking like him. And the same thing happens with diet. You got to figure that out when it really comes right down to it. You got to figure it out for your individual self, in my opinion.
Well, I think I would rather, and I think anyone that has a brain would rather get their information from you than maybe Dr. Gundry. He's now sold so many books. Sure. But the proof,
good for him.
I like what but I like what you're saying as far as experience. And, one of the things that I've told people with the people think, and see, you knew this 30 years ago, but even today, most people think that the idea of ketogenic is a diet. Oh, this is just another diet. Yeah. And so what I've told people is, think about it as cars. You know how you have the gasoline engine and some cars have the diesel, right? They both run, but they are running on 2 completely different fuel sources.
That's right.
And then, so glucose is kind of, our gasoline, and ketones are the diesel fuel. And as you probably heard also, especially if you wrote a book, the anabolic diet, I'm going to read that now. So
Check it out. It's out of production now, but I mean, you'll see it.
I
can
might find it on eBay though,
Yes,
and start talking about it.
but you might pay way too much for it. And I could actually get you, I think I can get that one for you or something we have, but it's called the anabolic diet. You'll see it on the internet, but it's out of production right now. But it's
So
anyway.
I'd love to ask your opinion on this because this makes me crazy. Have you, you probably know Nick Delgado?
Yes.
Okay. So Nick Delgado, I know him now because I met him at a lot of the different functions and conferences, and he is 100% vegan.
Right.
And I look at him, and he tries to do different things. Like he was doing something online where he was next to a 20-year-old
right
last year or so, and they were doing arm curls, and the 20-year-old could not keep up with him, and his muscles, I mean, he's muscular. And I just saw him at a conference a couple of months ago, and I thought, I don't see. Oh, and did you hear just yesterday or the day before, it came out in the news, there's a little article where Arnold Schwarzenegger said that his cholesterol was so high.
I saw that.
And the doctor said, you've got to lower it. So he went on an 80% vegan diet.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just reading this yesterday, and he said feels great, and it's not affecting his muscles. I don't see how that could be, but yet I see Nick Delgado, and he looks fine, and he's been on a vegan diet. Even though I see him and he might look healthy, I'm not doing a vegan diet because I just, like you too, I think too much. You see something, but too much to maybe do it for yourself. But then what do you think about something like that?
Well, here's, like I said, here's the thing. I think that the body becomes this function. It's an amazing organism. And some people just adapt to certain, you have that group of people that will just do better on different kinds of diets. I'm always skeptical about when people are saying that they're using a certain diet, because I'll tell you what, I'm not saying that Nick Delgado or anybody else, I'm not accusing them of that, but here's my experience from bodybuilding. Back in the old days, we got most of our information, and see more now in some ways, but from the magazines, and we see these guys doing a workout and they would be saying, this is what I do. Well, one day I just thought, I was in it for 6 or 8 years. I'm thinking, I saw this photo. I thought, how can those guys be that much stronger than me? So I went to Gold's Gym, the Mecca, as you know. I went to Gold's Gym and I just hung out there for a while. And here's what I learned. These guys were telling me in the magazine article, they were giving me a version of the whole truth, not the whole truth. Mm-hmm. I'm a skeptic, and yet I'm saying that I don't know. And I can't tell you that, good for Nick. Maybe he just got some real issues with the way his body breaks down protein. That could be the case, but I don't personally buy it. I don't think that that's the best way to go. And I don't buy it with Arnold either. I know these guys, sometimes we're just not being completely forthwith because there's a reason for it. I know some of the guys in the bodybuilding, they were not being completely honest because they were selling back in the day, Mike Mincer, he sold heavy duty, and that was a certain way to train. And that's what made him different in the industry. But when you got around him, you realize that he was actually training more like we call it volume training than real heavy training. I mean, that's just one example. So, and I think that's the same thing across the board. So I'm thinking good for Nick, and maybe that's what works for him and Arnold as well. I don't buy it. I don't think so, because I'm of that mindset that everything in our body is protein. Everything in our body is made from protein. Yeah. Why the hell wouldn't it be something that we would want to take in, and that protein? That's just my philosophy. And I've done where I've put myself on a high fat diet, and I've watched my cholesterol drop, and I did it with lots of other people and the same result. So I don't know, maybe it's just the way to sell whatever you're selling or push whatever you're pushing. Maybe, I don't know. But I wouldn't do it.
I saw this picture, a side-by-side pic, and it showed a beach back maybe in the 1970s. And there were maybe it was a far shot. So there were maybe 100 people on this beach. And then they show a beach in, probably 2019, because nobody was going to the beach the last year or so.
Yeah.
But they showed the difference over a 50-year period. And you couldn't even find an overweight person on that beach in the 70s.
Yeah.
Most people were average, but you should see the pic of today. And as you know, they said that right now, like a third of the country is considered obese.
Yeah.
Not just overweight, but obese.
Yeah.
And they said in the next few years, it's going to be 50% of the country is going to be considered at the obese threshold. And what was the biggest change is not just the packaged foods, but sugar and carbs. And of course, carbs get stored as fat.
Mm-hmm.
And what's so sad also is, it used to be people that got type 2 diabetes. You usually heard about that happening to older people, or maybe the 50s. Then 10 years ago, it was happening to people in their 40s. Now it's happening to so many people in their 30s. And that's pretty horrifying.
Let me tell you what I learned that was horrifying because of my strokes. I was just talking about, I'm a life coach, and I'm talking about, us facing our adversities, and whatever you think is an obstacle, you got to fact find and go head on. When I had my strokes, I had to find out why the hell only 10% of the people were making an almost 100% recovery. That pissed me off. That fact or that statistic just pissed me off. I wanted to find out why. And I went on the road and I did find out why. But here's one of the things that's alarming as far as heart disease goes. 1 in 5, this is a statistic that I found out about probably 8 years ago. 1 in 5 of our children have high blood pressure. 1 in 5 have high blood pressure.
That's terrible. Yeah.
And those 80% of those children become adults that have heart disease. So it's starting really young. Yeah. And so you have to take a look at what are these kids doing or not doing. I can tell you that I've been in the industry of training people for a long time, and I've trained a lot of young athletes. And I'm going to tell you something, the youngsters that are coming through now, they're soft. It's horrible. They're out of shape.
So sad.
It's very sad.
Yeah.
And so you start finding out really what the real problem is. One thing that I did find interesting is, as complex and as amazing as your body is, I didn't realize that your body does not have the molecular structure to store protein. That's the reason why you have to eat it every few hours. Say, unlike storing carbohydrate, your body can't store the protein. Now, here's also what I know. Maybe that one and done, like the doctor is saying. Look, I agree with you. Maybe if you're eating protein that has a lot of fat in it, red meat with a lot of fat, because what fat does, if people know how to use food, fat controls the release of the way your food is broken down. It controls sugar. So that's the reason why you can take that baked potato, that white one that's really bad for you, put butter on that. All of a sudden you made it a good. Why though? People ask why? Because fat slows the release of the sugar in your bloodstream. But what I found that was so interesting, but if you ate protein that had a lot of fat in it, it would take about 7 or 8 hours for it to break down. That makes kind of sense to me. Would I do it? No. But physiologically and the way that I understand how food works, it kind of makes sense to me. But if you ate chicken and use that argument and you're behind that, I think you're full of crap.